This is the In Your Faith podcast. Today, Pastor Bill talks to Greg and Jen Tonkinson about the Unwanted Fraternity.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to In Your Faith podcast. This is the podcast here at Arizona Community Church, and I'm Pastor Bill. I'm the lead pastor here, and I get to be the host for some special friends today, Greg and Jennifer Tonkinson. You guys have been friends for a long time. Well, at least we've known you for a long time because you have helped raise my children. And I think we knew you first because you were over at Bethany at the time.
Bethany Christian, right?
Bethany Christian.
Got to teach Jonah to get started.
You taught Jonah, who just graduated from ASU. Wow. So that's how quickly I know you guys know that. It must be interesting, real quick, before we even get into the podcast, it must be interesting, like when I had kids, you realize how quickly they grow up. Yeah. I always say you don't mark time until you have kids, because all of us are middle-aged, but we still think we're 25.
Oh.
Yeah, we have 5 kids between our blended family, and we just had our son and daughter-in-law over last night with our granddaughter. And he was asking about stages of life, and he said something like, does it ever get easier? Is there ever a stage where you can just breathe a little?
Yeah, that's when you die.
Yeah, and I thought...
You never stop being a parent.
Right, I couldn't think of one. But it does, when you look at your grandchild, you realize, how old am I to have a grandchild? But it's beautiful in the same sense.
It is, and it's amazing just how quickly it goes. But you as professional educators, Christian educators, it must be even more for you. Like, you get a class of kids, and over the year they become special to you, but then they move on, and you must, like, next thing you know, they circle back and they're like, oh yeah, I'm running a company, or I'm can you marry us? Yeah.
Or,
you get that.
Yeah, I mean,
they grow up into these men and these young ladies, and I can't recognize them sometimes.
Right.
I remember seeing Jonah just recently, and he's like, what, 6'7", maybe?
6'6", yeah.
I felt like a child standing next to him. I'm like, when did you get so grown up?
Hello up there.
But I remember them as these little bitty junior hires in my head.
Real quick, I had a youth pastor, oh gosh, if I can remember, his name was Grant. I can't remember his last name. And when I was in the youth group, and he would always ask for the kids to give him their old cards, their student cards. I don't know if you still have student IDs. And he would keep them so that he could always refer back. If somebody circled back, he could go find their card and go, I remember that person.
That would help.
Yeah, I'm a strong advocate of name tags, because kids, they see you, and I'm sure you face this all the time, where you're up there preaching, so 1,000 people, 1,500 people, they know you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then they make that assumption, he must know me.
Yeah.
So when they see you at the grocery store or somewhere where you're not, and then it's like, hey, Pastor Bill.
And it's so tough.
A name tag would really help.
I'm glad you did this. This wasn't a setup, so I'm going to speak to my congregation right now, and to any Christian out there. So whenever, and this is just me, like when I see somebody who I think might not know me, and I'll use Daryl Del Husse as an example. He's famous here in the Valley. He was the pastor over at Scottsdale Bible forever, seminary professor. And I've only bumped into him a few times, but we've had him preach at the church a few times.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And over the years, and this is when I was just the associate pastor. And so I had met him several times, but whenever he came to the church, I would always walk up and go, hey, my name's Bill. I'm the associate pastor. I met you. And I never wanted him to feel the burden of who is this guy? The other thing that drives me nuts, and this is for everybody, is when people walk up to you and they go, do you know who I am? Do you know my name? And it's like, don't do that to me. So I want to encourage you to always.
Tip. Yeah, that's a pastor pro tip right there.
It's a pastor pro tip, but it's also a social skills tip, is where never assume the person you're talking to knows you. And that's why I always get up in front of the church every week, and I always tell my staff, always introduce yourself, because there's going to be people who don't know who you are that are either watching or in person. So anyway, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Well, we're having you on because you guys come to ACC here. You've been involved, which you two don't know how honored I am that you guys would come to this church. And Greg, you're part of our pastoral preaching team, and everybody loves you here. But I wanted to bring you guys on because you both have not just a significant ministry in the Christian education world, but you have started some other ministries as well. So in particular, you have a couple of podcasts. And why don't we start with Unwanted Fraternity?
Sure.
Tell us about that ministry.
Yeah, no, thanks for having us on. It is really our pleasure. And so back in 2010, I lost my wife to a car accident. She was hit from behind. She was waiting to come home to a husband of 12 years, children 10, 6, and 4. It was just a typical Saturday evening. And so that proverbial knock on the door that everyone sees in movies or reads in books happened at my house on a Saturday night around 7:30. And because of that, everything changes like in that moment. And so not to belabor that particular incident, but that really catapulted me into a season of the unknown, into a season of my faith's always been this, and now God, I'm in this situation. So when you look at questions that are typically fought and learned in the classroom, worldview, who am I? Where am I going? Is there a God? How does he deal with pain and suffering? Well, now I'm living it. And I'm living it in real time with 3 young children who are also living it. I've often thought, man, I lost my wife, and that is tragic in and of itself, but what's it like to be 6 and lose your mom?
Exactly.
What's it like to be 10? What's it like to be 4 years old? And then, what's it like to be a parent to lose your child? And right. And so we're wrestling through all of that at the same time, trying to raise kids, live lives, be productive citizens, follow Jesus.
And that's the title of not only the book you have here. As a matter of fact, why don't you hold that up for everybody to see? Tell us about just the name Unwanted Fraternity. What does that mean?
It's a great question. So in 2013, 2012 or so, Jen and I met.
Yeah.
And we started dating, ended up getting married in 2013. And I had started my doctoral program in 2007. And then my wife lost her life in 2010. So the program just takes a stop. Yeah. And my first reader came back in 2012 and said, hey, do you just want to cancel this? Is this... So I went to Jen and I said, listen, I started this doctoral program, but I've got to write a paper now. And so my paper is on sanctification. And, I don't know if it's interesting to you or not, but I started it with my first wife. I'm asking you.
Now, were you married at this point?
So we were dating.
I think we were married. I feel like it was after 2013 that you wanted to finish.
That's when I started up
That's
again.
when you started up again.
Yeah,
that's
but
right.
I was having these conversations with Talbot School of Theology in 2012.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So right around 2013.
Where I graduated from.
That's right, yeah. And so 2013, Jen and I got married, but one of the interesting dilemmas we were facing was, okay, we just got married. He's going to go write a dissertation, and now
we're a blended family.
And we're
so
a blended
let's just
family.
add a little more
so
stress
Jen now
to that,
has
right?
to. She's got to manage 5 children now instead of just 2.
While you're off
all
writing.
of this is coming at us, and it was in that moment when I can't remember if it was you or me or a combination. I said, you know what? I journaled from the very day that I lost my wife through the first year almost daily. That was my cathartic way to not only get my thoughts down, but selfishly I wanted those thoughts to be for my kids when they grew up, to look back and say, what was that like? Because, sometimes we go through things and we look back and think, what was I thinking during that time? So I just wrote everything down. Well, what happened was, and again, this is 2010 when technology is starting to get, a lift up, and handheld technology and blog posts and all this stuff. And so I found myself on, I think it was like WordPress or some archaic thing back in the day. And instead of me being inundated with people asking, how are you doing today? How are the kids doing today? That just gets to be a burden because their heart is right. But when you multiply that out with how many people are asking, so I just found this to be a great medium to say every day, here's how we're doing. Here's some pictures of the kids.
Interesting, yes.
And so I had this compilation of blog posts, And Jen and I were talking, and fast forward to 2013 or so, 2014, and she said, we need to start thinking about putting that into more of a book format to help to minister to people.
Right.
And I think it took a number of years.
I think it was 3 to 5.
3 to 5 at least
3
of hotels
writing.
and
Yeah,
weekends. And
So Jen, what was it like for you during that time? Because you were now engaged and going to marry a guy who had lost his wife and blended family. What were you going through back then?
It helped a lot that Leanne was such a wonderful person in the past. And so I learned a lot about her moving into the marriage. And so I wasn't threatened by her so much as just, I don't know, encouraged by her faith. And then I loved these kids so very much. And so it just made sense to put this into a book format for people to go through the journey of grief, but also push back. We were both adamant about it had to end each chapter with a part that brings you back to the Lord.
Yeah.
Because you can't get through grief without Jesus. And so that's kind of where we landed. So I ended up editing the book. I think I've read this book, 7-8 times. So,
that's
which
a
was
humbling
really,
process,
And you
by the
lived it
way.
too.
which was really difficult as the person who had not experienced this, and also being married to the person writing it and having his deep thoughts about his wife and his.
So the Unwanted Fraternity is what?
Yeah, so
that's
we
when we
thought,
came up with the name
yeah,
as we
so
started writing the book.
what is this? And we landed on, you know what? It is a fraternity, men, women, children, adults, who don't want to be in it. And so
That have lost a loved one.
we've broadened
broader
it
than
to
that?
It's interesting because
any loss.
my marriage, my ex-husband abandoned us, and so after 12 years, and so finding that healing from that grief. When I was reading this, I told him, I can relate to this. I can relate to the process of going through questioning with the Lord and understanding why things are happening to someone who I thought I was doing the right thing. I'm going to Bible studies. I'm a good Christian. And so it really helped me kind of identify that I was also walking through a tremendous amount of grief in a different way. And then once we started talking about the book, so many people were, I'm part of the fraternity. I have an illness, or it's
when
just crazy.
I do pastoral counseling, one of the very first places I start with people is I always tell them, you're not in this boat alone. That's
right.
And that's just kind of what I default to, because I want them to know, because a lot of times when you're going through something, you feel like you're in a desert by yourself.
Right.
But you're not.
And we end every podcast with that tagline, you are not alone.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
And we found people that have health issues, people that have financial loss, anything that equates to my life is now different because of this incident, because of this dilemma, because of this tragedy. You're a part of this fraternity. And what we've found is the more we can share our story, the more God chooses to use those stories to affect somebody that we might not even know at the time.
Yeah.
So we just feel like we're brokers of people's stories.
That's a way to put it.
And the podcast just helps connect people.
Now, do you guys, not to put you on the spot here, but is there can you give us an example of somebody that crossed paths with Unwanted Fraternity and either, got back to you to say, this is how it changed me?
Yeah, full circle to what we were talking about earlier about students and former students. By God's grace, I've been in education since 2008, and so I've had 14 years. I stopped teaching in 2022. I do more administrative type stuff now. But in those 14 years, and you have X amount of students per year, and so one of those students who graduated, I want to say in 2012, 13 sometime, started listening to the podcast and said, hey, I've got a story for you. And I thought, great. And again, what you were mentioning before about I had to go back into the yearbook and see who was this person. And then finally, once you get that little memory and you're like, oh, I remember this person now. So we had him on and he brought his wife on. And here's a kid that I can't remember the exact name of the disease.
I can't either.
But it is one of those chronic, tragic
and
diseases.
It's rare.
Like it's a rare disease. It's
Was it
autoimmune.
like a fatal
type
of disease? potentially?
Yeah, it will.
Well,
It's
eventually.
cancer based, and so you need all kinds of chemo and all kinds of stuff. And so he said, listen, when I was a senior in high school, I started feeling just lethargic and whatnot. And that led them down a path of going to Barrows and Mayo and all these clinics. And and getting diagnosed with this really rare disease, especially at his age. It was like in that kind of, and so his story walks us through being a part of this fraternity where everyone else his age are out doing, going to college and getting married and all this kind of stuff. Well, the beauty of this story, and by the way, not all of our stories have like silver linings in them.
Right.
Sometimes we have people on that are right in the middle of their grief, which we love because we don't want to paint this picture of it's all going to work out and you're going to, but in his case, he met his wife who was struggling with the same disease in the hospital. They were part of a trial clinic that they were working this new drug on young patients, and they met because you had to stay in the hospital for X amount of weeks, kind of secluded in the hospital. And they met and began a friendship because of this disease. And then ended up getting married. They live here now in the Valley. We still stay in touch. So we had them on the show, and Jen and I are just like crying, and we're also smiling. But I just sat back and thought, God, if we can just do this, if our ministry can include moments like this, all praise to Him.
Amen.
Yeah.
So when you guys, if you were to say, if I were to ask you, what is one thing what's one big mistake you want to avoid when you find yourself in the unwanted fraternity, and what's one thing that you can do that, like, what advice would you give when suddenly that door opens and you're standing on the other side and you're going, I'm now in a new chapter and I'm scared to be here. And so
I think we really fall on you have to pour into your community. So you can't isolate yourself when you're going through grief, and having people who are, believers in Christ, who are pushing you to go back to church with them, who are just willing to sit in that very uncomfortable space of silence when you don't know what to say, and they don't feel like they need to talk into your life just to be with you. That is such an important thing for someone going through grief.
One of the parts of the book I talk about sitting Shiva, and so in Judaism, in customary and Orthodox Judaism, they will sit Shiva with someone for, customarily it's 7 days. And so you lose your spouse, lose a child, go through tragedy. It's typically involving death, that the Jewish community will come to that person's house, and they still do it today in various settings, and they will sit with that person. But the caveat is, or the unspoken rule is, we don't do anything unless they do it first. And so we don't speak until they speak. We don't laugh until they crack a joke. We don't weep until they weep. Like, we let that person be themselves. But this unbelievable power of what I call incarnational ministry, where, with technology, we do so much now with texting, and we think that suffice. I mean, I've got kids today in high school that will start dating and break up via texting, right? I mean, there's this that's how we live today. Well, when you go through grief, some people have assumed that that's what we do as well. Like, we'll text someone, man, I'm super sorry that, and while that will play a part because of living in the 21st century, I know you talk about that a lot. Like, this is the time we're all living.
Yeah.
We can't let that take center stage when we talk about being when weeping with someone. The Bible says rejoice and weep together. Yeah. What we've found to be most powerful is be in the same space as that person, if at all possible.
Well, what you're bringing up is, I struggle with it as a pastor, is what do you say in that moment?
Right. So that's the next question is people will say,
but I think you just answered it, is you're actually taking the pressure off of that I needed to hear that. And I think there's people that are going to listen to this to go, I know somebody that's going through a difficult time. What am I supposed to say? And maybe the answer is just nothing. For a while.
Hug, touch their shoulder, touch their arm, let them know just non-verbally, I'm here. Yeah. But yes, don't feel the pressure of, here are my list of things to talk about, because typically it's not a great list. Yeah. It's something that I created out of nervousness or stress, and now I'm going to try to do something in this moment to create a false narrative, which is let's be funny right now, or let's cry right now. And what I found in my grief was man, throughout the day, I would go through the range of emotions, and you may meet me in a moment where I am laughing.
Right.
But that doesn't mean 20 minutes from now I'll be laughing, right? And so, and we all kind of know that, but until I'm in that moment, but that's what we get asked that a lot. How do I act in the moment? Just be with the person.
Just be with the person. Yeah. And I think that's very freeing for sure. Let me ask you this question, and Jen, I'll start with you. Is there a difference in the way you minister to a man and a woman as they're going through the grieving? And of course, I'm sure there probably is. And I know, women and men are different, obviously, but, do you see a difference, and how does that play out?
I would say women are more highly emotional, and they need to be able to be open in that emotion, in that space that you're with them. I don't typically spend time with men grieving with them. I would definitely defer to my husband here so that he could. Well, I'm more.
I can tell you as a pastor, men. I think women because they're more open and vulnerable, generally speaking. It's easier for a pastor because they're, as a man, I'm reading cues. I'm like, okay, they'll, with my wife, I'm like, she'll be like, we need to go share hearts. And I'm like, honey, what does that mean? Right. Like, you need to tell me and lead me to that point where you're, but yeah, for men, it can be, I guess, a very different ballgame.
I think we found when we did we've done some grief share conversations with people at some of those conferences. And so it is when it's a woman asking a question, I typically answer that, and men drift more towards Greg.
We were at a grief share here in town, guest speaking at a grief share meeting, and we always go around the room, why are you here, basically. And just in that, we find that on the whole, women are much more apt to share why they're there, where we'll get to a man and he'll be very succinct, very quick. We had one man say to us, he came up afterwards and he said, basically, I was brought here. Like, I didn't want to come here. And it was a divorce care.
Yes.
We were at divorce care. And a newly married couple, both, I think second marriages for both. And so the guy was brought there and he made that known. But after sitting in this meeting for a couple hours, it was, I'm glad I was here. I want to connect with you guys. So I would say when you're ministering to men, I was at the hospital shortly after my wife passed, and a friend called and said, again, we're talking about brokering relationships. She called and said, there's a person at the hospital almost identical to your story, which is rare that you don't have that. But his wife was a nurse. She was killed in a car accident.
Wow.
He was left with small children. And so I'm driving to the hospital thinking, this is insane. Like, how clear is this that I think God was just bringing us together? I go up into the room where he was, and his kids are playing off to the side, and he's on a laptop or something just kind of working away. And I walked in, and he had a disposition of, like we have right now, just kind of, it's a normal day. And I looked around, and I thought I was in the wrong room. I thought, this can't be a guy who just lost his wife. I was expecting to come in with weeping and just, And so, and I said, maybe I'm mistaken here, but did you just lose your wife? And he said, she, a couple of days ago and whatnot. And I said, man, I'm so sorry. And he said, well, and life goes, like, he just took a posture in grief books of denial. He was in complete denial. Right. And I think a lot of men will shift towards survival mode of, like, I've got to now protect these kids, and so what's my attack on the day, as opposed to what just happened, and how am I going to like just experience that? And I think women just have a little bit better tendency to embrace those emotions. And so we just got to be aware of that.
And if you're our age, we're in our 50s, we were raised by a generation of men who didn't share anything.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Get on with the day.
And so it wasn't really modeled for our generation. And the one thing I'd say too is for men in particular, there's so many men, and I know you experience this, and you might experience this with women as well, is when somebody finds out I'm a pastor, I've been a seminary, the whole 9 yards, and you as well, a lot of men are intimidated by you and me, because they're like, they don't know, they're like, I don't know the church world. I don't know the Christian world like these guys do. They're pros. But oftentimes when you can get a man to come to the church and get involved a little bit, he realizes, oh my goodness, this isn't what I thought it was. It's far more, these are real people. And so.
And I would say, back to Jen's point of community, I think ACC, one of the reasons we're here is because when we first came, we came as a blended family, and we do value our kids' opinion. They don't make the final decision, but we needed them to at least feel like, no, this is, and our kids came out that very first day and said, I don't know about the pews, but these people are real. They're nice. And there's something about community that ACC has and other churches do, but I would tell those men, Bill's messages are great, the choir's great, the contemporary music is great, but where you're going to find that is men's ministry, is a small group, is Sunday school.
Or a grief share group or
grief
divorce
share.
care.
You got to break that down, where we tell people all the time, I wish instead of, hey, nice to meet you, what do you do, where do you live, I wish we in our culture would start those conversations with, tell me your story. Because we've had in these moments in Sunday school, here at the church, elsewhere, when we start with, tell me your story, it opens people up to, you want to get to know the real me. And I mean, I'll preach various places and I'll inevitably tell my story. People will line up, strangers, with tears in their eyes, and they will say, I've been going to this church for 15, 20 years. Nobody knows this about me. And they'll tell me their story with tears in their eyes because it's something similar to mine. Yeah. And my heart breaks thinking, I'm so glad you're in church. I'm glad you're coming to church, but why don't people know this? And it's a little bit of both. It's I don't want to share it because it's vulnerable, but also no one's asking. So we need to get in these spaces where there's a moment where amidst the fun and fellowship and food, we can get down to, hey, not just how can I pray for you, but what's going on in your life right now? And you'll find there are more people in the fraternity than maybe we once thought.
Oh, I think we're all in it. We're all in it to a certain degree, and we may not want to think we are. And like, I'm not in it to what you went through was, DEFCON 5 type of thing. Yeah. But I think if we're all honest, we'll go, I've had stuff in my life that puts me in that fraternity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Tell me real quick, Jen, I'll talk to you about this, is just since we're on the subject of bringing your families together, what was it? What was the difficulty of bringing blended families together? Especially during this time, was there a difficulty? Because I know a lot of people listening to us.
I know that might have to be another podcast.
That might have to be another one.
No, I can.
We can pause. I was just thinking about that as we were.
There are so many parts that are difficult. You have to. Well, you have. So my two boys were raised by me. Yeah. So they had that female. Bringing up. So I'm a little more.
You had to play both parts.
Yes, I had to play both parts, but I'm definitely more female than playing the male part. Yeah. And so they were a little less throwing the ball around. I don't even know if they could really throw a ball around at that time when I met Greg. Yeah, high learning curve. And then his kids were raised by a man, so they were like in and out of the house in like seconds. They ate all their food. They like this, and my kids were like, I don't know. Mom says we can sit at the table a little longer. So there's a little bit of adjustment. I would say a big adjustment coming in with that. But our kids were young. They did not share time
because
at other houses. So like my ex-husband moved out of the country and really did just kind of check out with the kids. And so he then stepped in when they were pretty young. Yeah. And we had to establish this, like, this is our new home and this is our new norm. So we are a little bit different from most blended families in that aspect.
A blended family is, in a sense, for some people, a lot of people, it's like, this is an unwanted fraternity. I don't want to be mixed with another family.
Absolutely.
I like my old family.
There are so many pitfalls with blended families that, and we never want to, like, to what degree are you a part of the fraternity? Because your pain is your pain. And someone in a blended family, You take a teenager in a blended family, they're looking around thinking like her oldest son now became the number 3 in the age, so he went
So
from
mess with
oldest
your
to
head.
number 3. Yeah. His dad abandoned him. Like they're going through a lot. So they didn't lose anyone, but man, we've met some people and in blended families, unlike like when we all started with our first marriages, you're young or you're just starting out. Blended families, often you're merging 2 corporations almost because you're managing 2 houses, 2 sets of furniture, 2 jobs. I mean, all
2
of
cultures.
This, 2
it
cultures,
is 2
2 ways to
cultures.
parent, 2 of everything.
Yes.
When we went through our second wedding, it was funny because people were like, well, what do you want for a wedding gift? We're like, please, no. Like, we
do not want any more.
You should have
we're
had
trying
people
to give
take stuff away.
Right,
Yeah.
we should have had like a
Get a
yard
van,
sale
take it
at the
out.
reception.
Yeah.
Come take, because it's just a different stage.
Yeah.
But that brings with it challenges. And so again, our recommendation, if you're in a blended family, is find other people in blended families and just agree
Form a
that we're
support group.
in this.
Yes.
Yeah, like we don't, but the difference I would say is there's help through Christ, not through our own wisdom, because we've been a part of some groups where it's just people griping about how difficult life is, but there's no solution.
So can
and what we want is a solution.
Yeah, can you guys speak to that? What is this? There's grieving the way the world grieves, and there's grieving the way the Bible talks about.
Yeah.
So how speak to that issue of just the importance of grieving and having God's word and Christ at the center of it.
Yeah, one of the sections in the book talks about lamenting, and I think that's the biggest difference is God loves when his kids are real with him. But in the lament psalms especially, there is a pattern, which is honesty and then always ending with praise.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this moment of, God, I feel like you're not even here. Psalm 13, where are you? Like my tears are like drowning me.
Yeah.
And all of this that David is just vomiting out with honesty.
Yeah.
And then there's this moment, almost like it doesn't even fit with, and yet I will still praise you.
Mm-hmm.
Yet you are still my God. And so what we always recommend is be honest with God, but that's not the end of the conversation. Yeah. It's always going back to, if you believe that God was good prior to that tragic date, he's still good after the tragic date.
Amen.
That would be,
and he has a purpose in it.
And
all of it. I mean, your guys' life are a perfect example of this. You two would have never met. And the difference that you're making now would have never happened had you not gone through what you went through and what you went through.
It's one of the most diabolical. If you're ever like, should I ask questions to people who are grieving? Please don't ever ask the question, would you want to go back, and have never happened.
So don't ever ask that question.
Don't ever ask that, because so many things have happened since 2010 that have been really, really good things.
Right.
And yet the tragedy that happened on that date and since then is really, really difficult. Yeah. And so it's a no-win question. I can't answer that with any ounce of integrity by saying yes or no to that.
Right.
And so I would just bypass that question.
Okay. So this morning, my wife listens to podcasts every morning. Yeah. And she used to listen to them on her phone, which meant I had to listen to them. But that kind of drove me crazy sometimes. And so she started wearing headphones. But today she wasn't wearing her headphones. And what I'm about to say, you'll appreciate. So all of us, we've been in the Christian world a long time. We've done a bazillion Bible studies. We've read the Bible. We've listened to all the preachers. And so it's rare that I hear something that really is new to me, or an insight that is like, wow, and it happened this morning. She was listening to the podcast and I was listening in, and I don't even know who it was, but this gentleman had a really awesome insight, and it is this, that our God there's no changing in him. He doesn't even cast a shadow, which means there's nothing he hides, in the sense of he's pure light. He doesn't even cast a shadow. Satan's just the opposite. Satan masquerades.
Yeah.
And he wears masks. And so I think so often as we go through grief, the temptation is I'm going to put on a mask and hide. I'm going to hide everything from everybody because it feels safer, it feels right. But his point in that is, in that moment, you think you're protecting yourself, but in fact, you're playing right into the enemy's hands.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So, and yeah, I was kind of like, wow, I didn't see that. But this goes back to the issue of vulnerability. In that, what would you say to the person that's listening to this right now who's going, there's no way I'm going to ever share or open up about this with anybody?
I found every time I do share a little bit about my story, I get a little bit more comfortable with it. And so I feel less shameful in it, especially with divorce and especially being divorced in the church. At first I was like, how do I do this? I feel like I have a scarlet D upon my chest.
So can I be honest with you?
Yes.
When we started this podcast, you shared your story, because your story it's like, my wife died in a car accident on her way home from work. But I'm like, should I, I forgot, I couldn't totally remember your backstory.
Yeah.
I knew something happened, but I was almost afraid to bring it up because I'm like, is she going to be ashamed of it?
Right.
At first I was, because I didn't know why. I wasn't expecting it to happen. So just very short, we were married for 12 years. We had a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. I was a stay-at-home mom, and he traveled a lot and was very absent in the home, but always like, everything's great, everything's good, I'm going to get this promotion, blah, blah, blah. And then came home from a trip and just was like, I don't want to do this anymore, and I don't love you, and I've never loved you, and I don't really want to love you, but you're a good person, and you can have the kids and move back home with your parents. It was very transactional, and I was very shocked. And so I thought, well, why was this happening to me? I'm a good Christian woman, and I go to Bible studies, and I'm raising my kids in the Lord. And he hadn't been to church with us in a while, which is a red flag looking back.
Yeah.
But coming out of that and moving to Arizona, we went to Red Mountain Community Church with my parents. Yeah. And I remember this one woman, I was so adamant, I want to share my story. But I wasn't mature enough in my healing, I guess.
She wanted to share her story with you.
No, I wanted to share my story to women. I'm like, I want to get in women's ministry. I want to tell women about what happened to me. Yeah. And it was almost this, like, I want to help women fix their situation. And I wasn't mature enough to understand that, no, I needed to sit with the Lord for a while and really understand what it means to grieve the loss of my marriage. So
let me ask you this question. Is it, so I, as a pastoral counselor, when I do pastoral counseling, which isn't often and it's not long, but a lot of times I have women who come into my office whose husbands are checking out of the marriage in one way or the other. And did you feel a shame initially? Like, what's wrong with me? Why is he abandoning me? Did you want to hide that? Or, because it sounds like you weren't afraid. You were ready to come out of the gate and share it.
I was ready to come out of the gate to share what I was angry about. Okay. I was not comfortable sharing that I had a low self-esteem. Okay. That came out later once I kind of worked through what I was going through. And even when I married Greg, he is very confident and I was very not confident. Yeah. And so it was a little bit of a stress in our marriage, because I always thought, well, he's just going to leave me too, because I don't have enough worth. Why would someone leave this when I was doing everything that a wife and a mom you would think to do? I read all the books. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
You're the perfect wife.
I'm very like A-type personality kind of person. And it was hard to admit that I had an insecurity and that I thought that I was worthless and all of those things. But that was so good to say that out loud, because then it was a doorway for the Lord to start healing my heart. Yeah. And now I can speak to other women like, hey, share your story. Like, we all have mess. We all have stuff. It just, when I do share my story with women, they tend to like soften and go, oh, okay, she will understand me. But I can't say this enough. People will understand you. Everyone has something to share.
And everybody, I just shared this, I think, on the pulpit on Sunday, at least in one of the services. We as the Christian community, the world tells you to put up your guard and to protect yourself because you'll get hurt. But 99.9% of the time, especially in the Christian community, but even in the world, when you let your guard down, it only endears you to people. You think, oh, they're going to reject me. There might be that one person out there that runs from you. But the majority of people are going to go, I needed that.
And we would highly recommend, once again, like I can't emphasize this enough, in the same space. And so, yes, you can post things, and yes, but where most of, kids even today struggle with self-esteem is because of comments made on their posts. And so I think you're right. When I'm in a room and I share my story, who's going to come up and throw rocks at that? Most people come up with gratitude or and it opens them up to share theirs. But man, we've seen destruction happen online because we sit behind screens and we feel like we can say things without any accountability. So once again, find those people where I'm sitting down sharing my story, and you'll find that the relationship you never thought could happen, this friendship you never thought could happen. I remember saying, I don't know if it's in the book, but I said, if you were to ask me prior to 2010, how many widows do I know? How many young widows do I know? Maybe on one hand, maybe. Yeah. And then after 2010, it's like you don't think about seeing a white car and then all you see are white cars. That's all I saw, where I would see young widows time after time and after time. And I thought, once again, God, I don't want to be a young widow. I didn't sign up for that, but now I'm here, can't take it back. What if I could be around other young widows so that we could link arms, lean into Christ, and figure this out? Yeah. And sure enough, and then we have, this ministry now. So
that's exciting. So real quick, let me ask a couple of fun questions. How did you two meet? Well, Jen, you answer. How'd you guys meet?
On eHarmony.
Oh, you met on, I thought you would have met at Valley Christian or through Christian Education.
I wasn't working there yet. No.
And who clicked who first?
So funny, I guess funny, but so on eHarmony,
our dating life.
Going on eHarmony, you can set parameters.
Yeah.
So I set mine on, I'll take anyone.
No psychopath. Click that button.
Yeah, that for sure, but also geographic parameters.
Yeah.
And so I say, when we talk to people about the story, I say, I was just I didn't want to limit God. If he wanted to bring me someone from anywhere in the world, well, truth be told, I am a big fan of accents, and so I thought, Australian accent, and so I said, anywhere in the world, God, I'll take anyone in the world. Well, Jen set her parameters to this. Whatever the smallest was, 10 miles or something.
Now, you're from Texas. I thought for sure you probably would have checked the Texas box.
No, I didn't want to move.
Yeah, and so
I had to be within my 12-mile.
Well, and that was the funny thing lifestyle. Is once we started, because you got to go through a bunch of hoops to get to a phone number. They do a good job on, we won't.
Protecting.
Yeah.
So finally you reach a point where it's he's going to ask for your phone. Are you comfortable with that? And she's like, yeah. And we lived 10 miles away from each other.
Oh, that's wild.
And never crossed paths.
Yeah.
And so, both in Christian education.
Both in Christian education.
Well, I was not in Christian education yet. I was in public school education, but I was doing. I was public school teacher. But there was a position that opened at Bethany, and that's when I got on there.
So. Yeah.
So, if I were to, I always like to ask this question: who liked who first?
I think we both mutually liked each other. I'm going to go with that one.
There was again, not to
Have we ever asked
with
that
our
question?
silver lining. There's always an underlying, and so I'll say that we got engaged shortly after we started dating, within 6-7 weeks ever. And
we
then
do not recommend that. Let me
do not recommend that
not
because
do that.
we were about a month and a half.
Why would?
Because we have little
infatuation.
It was, and we were both very taken with each other's.
And by the way,
faith
pro tip on grief. Once again, you are so vulnerable when you go through grief that you just start reaching, and often unwisely reaching at whatever you can latch onto to fill the void. And so in our, we were both married for 12 years. Now we've been single for a while. And so you're looking at someone wow, they're giving me the time of day. Wow, they're actually attractive. Wow,
I will say though, I had a list, and the Lord knew my list, and Greg matched all of those.
Yeah, and vice versa. But with that comes, we got to get married right away. So we got engaged, and then about a month and a half before our wedding,
after the invitations had been sent out.
That's right, yeah. And so I went over to her house and broke off the engagement. And,
what?
Oh, yeah.
Know. Another divorce.
Another rejection for Jen.
Right. Well, I mean, again,
and with
like,
the low self-esteem, can you
right.
imagine?
I mean, we laugh about it now just because it worked out,
Yeah.
but that was a
That was
huge
hard.
moment
Yes.
because I was thinking, great, she just told me about this guy who wrecked her life. I'm about to go
So
and
what-
do the
why'd you
same
do it?
thing. So you know me well enough to know, and I think we're akin in this, that like I believe God speaks to you primarily through his word.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the primary voice of God. There's been maybe 2 times in my life where I haven't heard his voice, but the impression was so strong that I couldn't conclude it was anything else. And so it was a Thursday night, and I was in bed and about to go on with my day on Friday, and there was this feeling I had of, you can't marry this person now. Not ever, but not now. And like, you know, God has his way. I got the best night's sleep that night, knowing I was about to go have this horrible conversation. Like there's this moment where you just know, like, I have to
Jen,
do
I
this.
feel bad
Right.
for Jen.
So
I took the day off.
she
the next
got
day.
the
I was
knock on
like,
her door that she wasn't expecting. She was like wide-eyed and like, oh my gosh,
you
like
came to visit?
me unexpectedly. And then we spent 2 full days of
How do
weeping,
we get out of this?
and then we sent out an email. We broke off the wedding, and it was horrible.
Were you second doubting the relationship, or were you just second doubting the speed of it?
The speed.
I would say we didn't give ourselves time to walk through grief well.
Correct.
Because
When we started dating.
yes, when we
Yeah.
started dating, because that's a whole new set of like stuff in your head that you weren't ready for, because you don't know it exists
Well,
until
and
you get there. And then we didn't give our kids, honestly,
That was the big
a
part, I
real
think.
a long enough time to fall in love with us as a
Yeah.
unit.
Your second marriage, often, if you have kids, like you're marrying families together,
Right.
not just individuals.
And they liked each other, but
They liked
it was
each other,
just,
but I looked at
I
Jen
feel like
and I just
they
thought,
couldn't wrap their heads around it just yet.
yeah,
It was a
I
lot
looked
for
at
them.
you and I thought, wow, she's gonna be my kid's mom. Like, and that's like a weighty. And I thought, how do I know her well enough? Does she know me well enough?
Yeah.
We had been dating for 6 weeks, like.
Yeah.
So we pulled it off, broke off for a while. That's another story. But we ended up getting back together about 3-4 months later, and then set another date. So we had 2 proposals.
Yes.
The first
I got
one
2
was at the
proposals,
school.
and they were great.
Nice.
First one was at the school.
Did you get 2 rings out of it?
So
No.
here's the deal.
He-
The
no,
the
he
first
kept
one was at the
I like
school, and eHarmony, circling back to them, we posted because it was videotaped and stuff. It was limousines and champagne and
Greg went over and
roses.
above.
And they
was
saw
my
the video
storybook.
online, and they came to us and said, "We want you to be on our commercial
Really?
to
Yeah.
promote eHarmony." Well, then
We even get a
then we
T-shirt.
broke up, and then I said, "Hey, by the way, still want to be on the commercial, but we're no longer together." Dear Greg, no, thank you. You know. And so the second
not gonna help us.
engagement was she walked into her house, and,
And
there
how
was
long after was the second did this happen?
less than
For-
about a year, 10 months or so.
Yeah.
It was about 10
It
months.
was
And
a
so the
while.
second engagement was she walked into her house. There were rose petals up to her kitchen table, much like this table. There was the rose and the ring, and she said yes. We went out to Sonic. We got hot dogs, came back and watched the Yankee Red Sox game.
It was great.
And she would say those 2 engagements rival one another.
Yeah.
Really?
I
very
would
cool.
say I was out of money because I spent so much on the first engagement that the best we could do was hot dogs at
That's
Sonic.
it. Hot
But
dogs
it
are-
worked.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're celebrating our 11th
Yeah, we
year.
just had our 11th anniversary.
So
Yeah.
so we're moving forward.
That's so awesome. So
Yeah.
let's circle this back. How would somebody find Unwanted Fraternity? How would they, if somebody's just out there and they're alone and they're hearing this podcast, how do they find you?
Great question.
So we have a website, unwantedfraternity.com. You can go on that website and share your story with us. You can give us permission to share your story on our podcast, which we so love. So we would love for people to do that. But just even if you want to reach out to us, we'll get emails
And would
from
they
that.
reach out through your website?
Yeah, we can reach out through the website. We're on Valley Christian's website if you wanted to go through that, and you can find our teaching email. We have Instagram. We're on Facebook. I think we're on TikTok. Yeah, so
And
you
how
can
about ordering
message
the
us.
book? What if they wanted to get the book?
The book is on the website. You can order it straight through us, or you can go on Amazon, Target, and wherever Barnes and Noble, wherever books are sold.
And I would say too, if you live in the Phoenix area, we would love to have you on the podcast. And so shoot us an email or
share your story.
And we'd love to, because again, we love reading people's stories.
Yeah.
But when we get them to tell their story, it's a beautiful thing.
On our website, our video production team, who's sitting on the other side of the camera here, we have filmed some really powerful testimonies of people at our church. One of them was Honoree, a gal by the name of Honoree who got hit by a truck, lost both of her legs. But
powerful.
I wanted those posted on our website for the very purpose of people seeing real stories being told. Like, oh, this is a church where people
Those are our analytics show us that when we have guests on and they share their story, that's the most views. That's the ones we get the most of. And we're big fans of people sharing their stories.
That's awesome. Well, hey, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having us.
This wraps up our In Your Faith podcast. We hope you'll join us again. As a matter of fact, we're going to have you guys on again, and we're going to talk about another ministry that you guys just started, which we're really excited to hear. So God bless you guys. Thank you for tuning in today. Bye-bye.
The In Your Faith podcast is a production of Arizona Community Church. Thanks for joining us. Come back next time for part 2 of Pastor Bill's conversation with Greg and Jen Tonkinson.